Okay, so here are the kick drum settings. All I have in the bass drum is a little towel just touching the front and back like Mike suggests. Stops the skins from resonating and making a really long sustain of the drum. I like a tight kick sound. So my front skin, these are the stock skins from the manufacturer. Haven't bothered to change them yet, but the front skin is on fairly loose. I would say it's just on with maybe a quarter turn on each lug, just to get rid of the wrinkles, give it a little bit of tone. And the front skin, the reso skin, is also a stock pearl head, and it's on a little bit tighter, probably half a turn on each lug. And the microphone that's being used is a very cheap CAD kick drum microphone. I'm not even sure, I think it's a KM212. It's probably worth about $40 to $50, but I'll show you how to get a decent sound from it. As far as the signal chain is concerned, from the drum set, the microphone is plugged into an XLR cable. It's going directly into this A to D converter, which is the Tone Port UX8. It's a fairly inexpensive unit if you want to get into this multi-track recording. So from here, this unit processes the analog signal, turns it into digital, sends it out to a USB port and right into the computer. So there's very little path as far as connections. It's basically plugging a microphone right into this box and then going into the computer. So very little loss and noise involved there. Not affecting the recording at all. It's not even plugged into the tone port. This is going out live, but I'm going to show you what these buttons mean and how to set them if you want to use a compressor on the kick drum or the snare or whatever. And you get the threshold. This is the ratio, the attack, the release, and output gain. These LEDs here indicate how much gain reduction is occurring, and I'm going to relate these buttons to the software plugin so you can see exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you're recording with no EQ, no processing, no effects, because if you are recording with that information, you are stuck with it. The software allows you to go in and add that afterward. If you're using a mixer, you're going to have to ring everything out before the recording. Just do some test recordings with your EQ settings, and it takes a bit longer, but you still end up with the same result. So once you have your signal going, the first thing I like to do is I want to sweep this frequency band for the kick drum. I'm listening for some odd sounds and tones that I don't really like, and right now I'm hearing a lot of boxy, boomy kind of sound. A good trick that I learned is to use a parametric EQ and with very narrow band, or very narrow Q is what they call it, and you sweep that frequency. You're listening for stuff that sounds good and stuff that doesn't sound good to your ear, so you can go back and set these EQs later. I'm listening for a resonant point right about here on my system. Sounds like the tennis racket sound, as Mike would call it, or very boxy. On my system it happens around 150. Okay, so once you find that resonant point in your system, what you want to do is take that peak and reduce the gain to get rid of that sound. Just turn it down till it sounds good. And the trick is that you want to reduce the gain of the EQ and not increase it, because increasing the level of EQ will add hiss and noise and a bunch of harmonics that will affect the other tracks. So the method of doing this is to reduce EQ whenever possible, unless you're going for some sort of sound. Now, if you don't have a parametric EQ, you can bring up a graphic equalizer, which does the same thing. It's just a little more time consuming. What you need to do is pull up the faders and drop them down and find your sweet spots and the sore spots of the sound. It does the same thing, it just takes a bit longer. But you can't use a shelf EQ, the ones that, let's say, low frequency, high frequency, because that drops a whole bunch at the same time, whereas a parametric or a graphic, you can select a certain frequency and just tailor that specific sound. Another thing I like to use is a compressor, and this one here that you're seeing now is a multi-band compressor, which affects frequency as much as it does the volume or the amplitude of the signal. But this one specifically, it can dial in to certain frequencies and attenuate or accentuate those volume levels. So very, very cool tool to have. And I'll go and explain the differences of these settings afterward, so you know why you're affecting certain dials and levels and what they do to the sound. So here's the final kick drum sound. Just added a little bit of EQ on the bottom end, and I'll play some drums with it after. You can hear how much the kick drum sound changes when all the other mics come in.